This is the Slow Wardrobe. Come and have a look. Hello, welcome to episode 135 of the Slow Wardrobe podcast. My name is Linda. I was anticipating to record and broadcast this podcast from somewhere in the middle of France, where I was earlier this week and last week house hunting, or maybe only just province hunting initially. And I was going to tell you today how far we got in our endeavors. So the second part of this podcast, instead of dedicated to Layercake, is going to be dedicated to the first step, or almost the first step, in our new French adventure. But before then, an update on my knitting and crochet antics. Well, there actually hasn't been that much in terms of knitting and crochet these past 2 weeks. I found that while we were in the car and I had anticipated to do an enormous amount of knitting, I was actually doing lots of navigating because we were staying off all the major roads, but then also off all the provincial roads and doing really higgledy-piggledy driving. And of course, if you just put a destination into the GPS system, it'll just keep sending you back to bigger roads. So instead, we had a map of France and did it kind of the old-fashioned way, bit of half and half, by looking for a destination, choosing a town or a village that was only like 8 or 10 miles ahead of where we were at that point, putting that into the navigation system, then driving there on the little roads, and while we were driving there I would pick up the next one, etc. So that made it very easy for Peter to just check the navigation rather than me having to say take a right, take a left, etc. But of course it kept me really engaged with the whole driving process, and as a result I did no or virtually no knitting in the car. But I did make a little bit of progress on a couple of projects. The first one is that I finally finished my cardigan, and as anticipated, I already showed you that all I had left to do was sew on the big poppers, the fabric covered poppers that I found online that are in, well, virtually the same color as the yellow of the lining of my collar and the ribbon that I've used to hide my steek. So that finally now allows me to do what I was so keen to do, and when the whole thing is closed, I do not see the closure. That's what I wanted to achieve. Of course, when you look from the side, you can see that there is a closure, but I like the fact that you have an uninterrupted view of these glorious Fair Isle patterns when it is closed. And I do not see the inside of the knitting of the collar when I have it hanging open like this. So I'm really pleased with that. Finally, done. Now having to wait until next winter, and who knows where I'll be next winter, so I may not get to wear it as often as I wanted. We'll see. So that was one finished project, and then I have 3 works in progress to show you and 1 future project that I haven't even started yet, and that only involves a small amount of crochet, but still it's crochet, so it qualifies in my opinion anyway. I am still working, of course, on the super light, super smooth and supple and soft little cashmere cardigan that I've been working on. If you want to see more and the shape of it, go to the previous episode. But just to show you how far I got since last time, I've only knitted a small bit of the second front panel, and I'm about 10 rows away from putting in, knitting in and knitting on the pocket, because I attach that as I knit, so I have no sewing up to do. So I'm about 10 rows away from that, and I've started working on that again, because that was something that definitely couldn't be done in the car, because I'm holding these 2 dark threads together. It's very easy to knit stitches where you miss one of the threads. So every couple of rows I have to check on the back and make sure that I haven't got any loops. If I do, then I tink back just that one stitch and pick it up. So it needs to be properly lit and a bit of concentration to knit on. So I'm working again now that I am home. I'm working on that again now that I'm home. So that is one that is a work in progress. Then the one that I started in the car, because that was possible to do while we were driving, is a new sock. I have not got the ball band here, but it's one of the big German sock brands, and I'm really pleased with how it is knitting up. I must have bought this at least a year ago, so it was in my stash. And with the couple of mishaps, for want of a better word, that I've had with some of the last socks that I knit for my husband, where all of a sudden a 60 stitch sock ended up being too tight around his heel to put on. This is 68 stitches. This is definitely going to easily fit. It's got the extra length that he likes, and I have worked my colors in a way that the pattern on top of his foot of the yarn is not broken up. So I ended up using a separate piece of yarn to knit the heel, and then continued with the color of the main sock, if you like, so that I have stripes that are virtually the same in terms of width, keeping going on the top, and then having the heel turn in the dark color, which is also on purpose, because of course that's where you normally have a lot of wear on the back of the heel. So that is an eye of partridge heel flap, and then the heel turn, and then resuming in the colors of the main sock. I'm really pleased with how that came out. So I have to hope I remember exactly what I did, because I'm great at forgetting that kind of detail. But just looking at the sock, hopefully I'll work that out. So that's about halfway. I've just turned that heel, and now it's just the toe. And then of course there's another sock to knit. But again, if on an evening that I don't fancy working on my cardigan, I do want to knit, I will pick up these socks and keep working on those. Third project that I have started is, well, it's not the third that I've started, but the third project that I have on the go now is not actually knitting. It doesn't involve knitting, it involves stitching. What I have here are two very, very fine cashmere shawls that are each 70 centimeters wide. 70 centimeters is 28 inches, and about 2 meters long, so 6.5 foot long. And in terms of size, I prefer cashmere shawls that are wider and bigger and have more bulk about them, that are more substantial. I also have, and I bought these two immediately with the idea, it was a business that was stopping trading, small English business, one of the many that I get in my inbox saying, we can't do this anymore with all the new rules that Brexit is bringing in. My imports are starting to be too expensive and whatever, and sorry, I have to throw in the towel. I think it's really tragic that, as per usual, small business are the biggest and first losers in the changes that are affecting this country at the moment. But anyway, that's a soapbox that I won't get onto. So as a result, these shawls were half price, so I bought two of them to sew them together, and that's what I am in the process of doing. I think this is the side that I'm working on. Yeah, I've got a couple of stitch markers to make sure that I don't keep it nice and straight, and that I don't end up messing up the top and bottom layer, and make sure that they keep nicely aligned. And I'm literally just using a tiny running stitch in a cashmere yarn by Gépard Cashmere Lace, 100% pure cashmere, and it is a lace weight that runs 330 meters per 25 grams. And the way that it is twisted, I was able to see that online before I bought this. I got this at Tribe Yarns, of course, and it is, because it is it's a tighter twist. It is, as long as you use it for soft fabrics, you can actually sew with it without it coming apart. So it's a great one. Would be a great one for darning cashmere as well. But anyway, I got this, and I got this color as well, bright pink, to do the next stage. Once I've finished sewing those two shawls together and having that big wrap, I am then going to attach on top of it a cotton, fairly voile-like cotton shawl that I've had for absolute years. It must be at least 35 years old. It's a shawl that is by Kenzo. Kenzo had a range at the time, I think it was there for more than a number of years, called Kenzo Jungle. And this is a beautiful rose-covered shawl by Kenzo Jungle. And it's got the yellows and pinks and blues and greens and whatever. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sew this on top of the thin cashmere shawls. I don't know yet whether I'm going to sew it in the middle or whether I'm going to turn it or offset it. I haven't decided yet. I'm going to play with that. Once these two are together, then I'm going to put them on top of each other in different ways and put them on to see what I like better. And the bottom line is, this shawl is going to be attached on top of that shawl, so the whole wrap will get a lot more substantial, but also really interesting in terms of adding these flowers to this beautiful, luminous kind of chartreuse kiwi type color. So that's stage 2, and when I sew this on, I am then going to, with my chartreuse yellowy and pink yarn, go with running stitches around some of the flowers. So on the back, on the cashmere side, you'll see some flower outlines, and it will attach the two shawls. Of course, they're attached already anyway, but it'll attach them and create extra embellishment and interest. So I will keep showing you these as well. I just want to show you, even though it's not crochet or knitting, an idea that you may be able to do with some of the shawls that you have at home. If you want to, create more interest or make a new or different wrap and add a bit of personality of your own to them, then of course this would be a wonderful way to do it. So that is project number 3 that I'm working on. And then last but not least, I have not got much to show you here at all, other than some yarn. This is a lace weight yarn that I still have from Artisan Yarns, and who's sadly not with us anymore. I still have some of her beautiful linen. It runs 600 meters per 100 grams approximately, most of them do. And I used part of this for a different project, then had this left over, and I'm going to use it to make a necklace, for want of a better word. I have here, it is, we first thought it was leather, but it's a fabric strap cord that holds, black fabric strap that holds this very heavy silver nugget. This is my husband's, and he wears it non-stop, but the cord has started to fray around where the silver rubs along it. So with linen being strong, I'm going to make a linen cord, probably crocheted on a tiny, tiny needle, and I'm going to use a silver chain to work into that crochet, so it'll almost look like it's been braided. It won't be a braid, it will be some kind of crochet stitch, kind of half surrounding a silver chain. So it'll be a silver chain with that thread worked around it to add an extra color and to make it nice and interesting and different looking, because we don't want to lose the effect completely that this is held on a cord rather than just a chain. Of course, we could just hang this off a silver chain and be done with it, but I want to make it a bit more interesting. So I will keep you abreast of that one as well, show you how it turns out. If I have any fails, I'll share those with you as well, because they're just as interesting to learn from. So that's what I'm working on, and a bit of future work as well. But that's it for these last 2 weeks, and the reason for that is this first part of our French adventure, about which I'll tell you a bit more now, including why we ended up returning to the UK almost a week earlier than we were planning to. So what about this French adventure then? Well, we came up with the idea of moving out of the UK and into France about almost a year ago, a little bit less, when we were in France at the converted watermill of our friends who live about an hour south of Toulouse. We spent a day around the mill. My husband was in a field sketching the mill, sketching flowers, sketching bees and butterflies, and came back after a couple of hours and said, you know what, I don't want to leave. This was about 3 months after he had left his kind of high-flying, high-powered job, and he was able to at least take some time off to decide what he wanted to do next. And in those 3 months, he had really taken up his other passion in life, which is painting. And his painting was coming on in leaps and bounds because he wasn't distracted anymore with the pressures and the bandwidth of his brain taken up with work all the time. So he was really enjoying that. And he said, when I was of college school age, there was a choice. Either I was going to pursue a career in business or I was going to go to art school. And being from the background that he was from, of course, the main pressure that was put on him is like, son, learn a good trade, make sure that you've got a steady income, and who knows what you would be able to achieve as an artist. So he did not go to art school. And he's now 59 years old, and he has rediscovered his passion for painting with a vengeance. So he came out of that field saying, you know what, I don't want to leave. What do you think of the idea of moving to France? So the idea started growing in our minds, and we were starting to think about where in France would we want to live. My initial idea with that proposal of, would you like to live in France, was like, oh my goodness, yes. Ever since the Brexit vote was cast in 2016, I felt that it was going to herald a period of enormous change for the UK. From my perspective, as an EU citizen, I really regard myself as an EU citizen. If the UK hadn't been part of the EU when I first moved here in 1993, I've been here for 32, I moved here in 1992, so I've lived here for 33 years. Later on this year, we're at 32 and a half at the moment. So I've actually lived in the UK longer than I ever lived in my birth country, which is the Netherlands. I moved out of there when I was 29 and a half. So having lived here for longer than I did in the Netherlands hasn't made me turn into a Brit. I don't think I ever really felt very strongly that I was Dutch and only Dutch. I think what it's happened, having lived in Holland half of my life and in the UK half of my life, I feel like an EU citizen and I never want to change that. I, of course, still have my Dutch passport, so for me to move around in the EU is very easy. And for my husband to move with me into the EU is not that difficult either. One, because we're married, and secondly, because of the financial situation that he is in now that he's left his job. And that financial situation would change quite dramatically if we would sell our house here in the UK and buy something in France. The intention of us is to live quite rural, and as a result, the difference in house prices compared to where we are here on the Hampshire-Surrey border, which of course is just an hour southwest of London. This is really part of the London commuter belt, so it's a very popular area to live, especially since the Hindhead Tunnel was built a number of years ago. So in terms of selling our house here and buying a house in France, not only would we be cash buyers of that French house, but we would end up with a sum of money in the bank that would further support our lifestyle there. So we floated the idea with the kids, who, of course, their initial idea was, oh my gosh, the house that we grew up in, but they're slowly coming around to the idea. And of course, the idea of us living in an environment where the weather is better and maybe have a pool and have a lot of sunny days in the course of the year is rather an attractive one to them as well by now. And add to that of course they're spreading their wings. We've got now one in Edinburgh, one in the Netherlands studying for a master's degree, and the other one having moved to the Netherlands with her boyfriend last autumn. So we're spreading out anyway. Of course, the Netherlands would have been a possibility as well for us to move there, but the weather is an important part for us. So jump ahead to the week before last, when we embarked on our trip to France and drove around different areas. We were intending to drive around 4 different provinces in France to compare the landscape, and with all the properties that we had looked at already, we had a little short list and said, well, if we are there anyway, let's look at some of the properties that made it to our short list. And we'll do 2 things. We'll tighten up the search area, because those 4 provinces, of course, make up a fairly large part of France. So we'll tighten up the area and decide which province is our favorite. And then we'll also look at some houses and see there are different styles and different sizes, as well as them being in those different areas of the country. So we'll look at some different properties as well and help us narrow down the kind of property that would be our ideal. That was the plan. So on Sunday, the 2nd of March, we set off. We took an overnight ferry to Caen, and we drove into the Loire Valley. We have been in the Loire Valley a number of times. We loved staying in Saumur, where we've been for a number of our holidays, right on the river in a little houseboat with a view of the castle of Saumur. And it's where we discovered a number of years ago that we absolutely love the running water of a river. So a river runs through it has always been a bit of a theme when it comes to choosing our next house. Hence our first area being the Loire Valley. We loved it around there, and we said, well, let's go a little bit further inland, away from the river itself, and have a look at the landscape, because we have bicycles, electric bicycles, that we love to use when it's nice weather, and we want to be able to jump on the bike right from the house and cycle around and have some beautiful landscape to explore. So we did that in the Loire Valley, and in the first couple of days we discovered that actually the landscape right at the river is really attractive. The villages there are lovely, but as soon as you go further away, and we actually only really explored the south side of the Loire banks, because the north side. We wanted to, that's about as north as we wanted to go. We wanted to be on the south side of the Loire. So we explored those areas and we said, well, in terms of landscape, it's not that interesting to us. It's all still quite flat, and therefore, of course, this time of year, it's all a little bit barren still. The trees aren't green yet. That was one of our motivations to go now. We want to be in a landscape that we enjoy even in winter, not just in summertime. So the Loire Valley, we kind of, not that keen. We had one house to view, very near Saumur, and we went there on Thursday morning, and it's the type of house that's called a longère. It's very long. It is not very high, so there is a second story, but that really is built into the roof, into the eaves. So you have a lot of angled spaces upstairs, and very often exposed beams if it's an older house, a converted farmhouse, which this was. The owner had done a magnificent job at restoring it and renovating it. It was a beautiful house, but like we said, relatively long. And we both came away with not enough land, too close to the road, too close to other buildings, and the shape of the house did just not appeal to us. Neither did the layout of the rooms, because with a longère you've got such a long, relatively narrow building. You very often have to walk, create a layout where you have an higgledy-piggledy of rooms, because you try to create walkways. Otherwise you have one room after another, and you have to walk through rooms to get to another one. And our feeling, the way Peter, my husband, summed it up when we came away was, well, we would never see each other in that house. It's like so long and narrow. We'll each be at one end. It just did not appeal. But neither did the area. So longère houses were kind of marked off the list and put down at the bottom of the priority list. And we set off to the next province, which is the Poitou-Charentes. It is a province that extends just beyond the line of La Rochelle and Ile-de-Ré. So it's kind of the middle of France, the middle in terms of north to south, but it's towards the coast, towards the west side of France, and it's next to I think it's called the Massif Central. It's the central part of France, which is not very densely populated. So the Loire Valley, then the Poitou-Charentes, then the next area that we were going to explore was the Dordogne, which is apparently, as we found out when we were in France, very popular amongst Brits. We didn't know that, but the French call it Little Britain. That did not appeal to me very much, that idea. And the fourth area was called Lot-et-Garonne. So those were the four provinces showing you on the chart. And we were off to the next one, the Poitou-Charentes. And we had booked 2 viewings on Friday, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And they were both converted watermills, not too far from Angoulême. You have Ile-de-Ré and La Rochelle, Cognac, and there's a couple of small towns like Jarnac, which is where we were staying, also in a converted mill, which I will be able to show you some pictures of right now. So this was the converted mill that we were staying in, with a weir and a little terrace that kind of stuck out over the river. So it was beautiful, beautiful little mill in Jarnac. It's on Airbnb. I strongly recommend it. It's a wonderful place to stay. So we were there for a couple of days, and on the first day we were there, on that Friday, we went to see two mills on the northeast and the northwest side of Angoulême. The first mill had on what looked on the photographs like some stunning rooms, and those rooms did not disappoint. What an unusual space. Of course, a lot of mills tend to be high because they have like millworks below and then living quarters above it or around it, or working areas depending on what was being done in the mill. So you potentially end up with lots of layers and lots of smaller rooms, or in some cases rooms that are of a double height if they have taken the second floor out. And in this first mill, the big living room was completely open all the way to the roof of the mill, and it was just cavernously high, and it looked like a film set the way the owners had dressed it. I think they were English owners as well. And we found out that a growing number of converted mills in France are owned by foreigners, in a lot of cases English and Dutch, and some Germans, because French are known not to be interested in converted old buildings. They want kind of new and modern and, you know, light and whatever, and none of this kind of rediscovering old walls and whatever. Apparently they're not really into that. We didn't know that before we came there. So that mill, beautiful, had a small swimming pool with it, had a lovely stream at the base of the garden. But one of our criteria for the house that we would like to move into is an inside-outside connection. Being able to open up the house with big double doors or sliding doors, and being able to pad out into the garden and have that open connection with nature and garden and trees and whatever for a big part of the year, as far as the temperature allows. And this mill had definitely had garden and had some land with it as well. In fact, a fair amount of land. But the land itself was all further away from the mill. There was no real connection between the mill and the land around it. Lots of very old higgledy-piggledy stairs, and lots of higgledy-piggledy stairs and path to get to the pool that they had built. So, and like that, more or less a dead-end road that the mill was built alongside, so that wasn't a problem. But on the other side of that path was another building, and that was also owned by the current mill owner, and he wanted to move with his wife into that building and just sell the mill. So it would mean having neighbors really on top of us with a yapping little dog. We very quickly decided that that wasn't for us either, despite that beautiful, beautiful living room and very inspirational space, that in itself. But the rest of the mill just did not appeal, nor did the absence of that inside-outside space that we were looking for. So we set off to go and see the second mill, wound our way through lots of tiny little roads in order to explore the region a little bit more. And what we did decide was that maybe we could do better in other areas of France, but we really did like the landscape that we saw around those villages that we explored, seeing the mills. So we rocked up at the second mill and fell in love, basically. On the way there, I said to my husband, you know what, having seen this first mill, we may just decide with the second mill that we're going to see this afternoon that these converted and renovated mills are not for us because of that layout and that absence of that inside-outside connection that we are so keen on. And I'm also not very keen on a mill if it's being fed by a river, because of global warming, rising water levels, etc. I do not want to live in a building that runs any risk of flooding at any time. And of course, by definitions, mills are. Our friends south of Toulouse have flooded a couple of times, I think, in the 20 odd years that they've been there. And it's never been very serious, but it always is a lot of work to overcome all the sludge that's being left, etc. So no river-fed watermill. So off we went to the second mill and fell in love. This mill is not river-fed. It is fed by a natural spring. And the river that runs at the base of the garden only springs 2 or 3 kilometers away from the mill. So we are right at the base, the start of a river. So even if there would be massive rains and floods and whatever, this little river would never be able to gather enough water from the surrounding landscape to, not where the mill is, to grow to a level that it would flood the landscape around it. Further down that little river, absolutely, but not where this mill is. So I would absolutely love to show you loads of photographs of the mill already, but of course we haven't bought it yet. We are in contact with the owners. We haven't even got our house on the market yet here in the UK. We're waiting for some leaves on the trees, because that makes a massive difference when you see the house that we're in at the moment. Leaves on the trees would make the house really sing. So we're racing ahead, and in the next couple of weeks we will be listing our house. Of course, things are starting to sprout, so the timing is perfect. And the owners of the mill, who also happen to be English because of the reasons that I was explaining of French people not being that interested in these old mills, have owned the mill for 12 years and have just done an absolute magic job in renovating it. The only bit of the mill that hasn't been tackled and finished yet are the machinery that connects to the millstones. The room with the millstones has been done. The millstones have been cemented into the floor of that room, so that's wonderful. That's really, really cool. But the room underneath still has all the mechanics, all the machinery that attaches to those millstones. That needs to be renovated. And then in the next space is another potential for a huge room with, on one end of it, the official wheel, the water wheel, which is still there. The mill was in operation until I think 1984, so it's only been like 40 years since the mill ran for the last time, and it is just stunning. It ticks all our boxes. We've got enough space, we've got enough land, we've got a beautiful garden, we've got that river at the base of it. We look out on the land that is part of a castle. So it is just, so there's no chance of any houses being built. It's just perfect in every way. And at the moment, it looks like, even though we haven't sold our house in the UK yet, it looks like it may be possible for us to buy this mill. So I will keep you posted. I hope you enjoyed the bits of landscape that I showed you so far. And I'll show you a little bit more of the footage that I shot from the car. There's not a lot of it because we didn't expect to be here yet before I sign off for today. Thank you for staying with me through all of it, if you're still here. Oh, and one rather important announcement. Do you remember that I was saying in one of the newsletters not so long ago that the studio that I'm in at the moment is going to be hit by the commercial rates that were scrapped by the Labour government coming in last autumn? Well, for whatever reason, the council here has decided to leave the small business support for the rents and no, not rent, but rates charge in place for at least this coming year. So we're not going to be hit with thousands of pounds of rates that are all of a sudden payable. I've got another year here of no rates to pay, which means that we won't have to scramble in the next 2 months to get out of this space, and that relaxes everything in terms of what's going to happen with the slow wardrobe. I've come to the conclusion when we were in France that in the long run, I don't want to try and run an English-based business from France, but there are more ways to skin a cat. I'm talking about what the possibilities are with Andrea, of course, as well. So as our plans unfold, I'll keep you posted, and as the house in the UK goes on the market and hopefully will sell, I'll keep you posted about that as well in future episodes. But for now, like I said, a little bit more footage of the French landscape and the French area that we hope to move into. We never saw the Dordogne, we never drove onto the Loire-Garonne. We literally turned our heels and said, as far as we're concerned, our search is over, and let's do everything we can to make it happen. So fingers crossed, and see you in 2 weeks' time. In 2 weeks' time. Thank you.